They never meant for you to hear this. Not in your lifetime. Not unless you stumbled into it, like a whisper buried beneath 2 centuries of lies. Section 1. In the hills of central Kentucky, there is a place where no birds sing after sundown. The land seems suspended in time, untouched, unspoken. But beneath its soil lies the secret burial ground of a once thriving religious commune that, over the course of 11 years, quietly erased 495 of its own. No headlines, no graves, just names crossed out of ledgers and memories scrubbed clean. Pleasant Hill, they called it. But what happened here was anything but pleasant. This isn't folklore. It's not just another ghost story to pass the time. This is an engineered silence. One that shields a monstrous truth hiding behind piety and prayer. For over a decade, Pleasant Hill stood as a model of religious devotion. Celibate, communal, righteous. The Shakers, peaceful servants of God, or so the world was told. But inside their gates, far from curious eyes, a single bloodline wove itself into every layer of power, creating a perfect system of psychological control, spiritual manipulation, and strategic elimination. You've been taught to trust religious sanctuaries. You've been conditioned to believe that purity and discipline equal holiness. But what if that was the trap all along? What if the very institutions that promised to cleanse your soul were designed to erase your autonomy, to rewire your identity, and, in cases like Pleasant Hill, to disappear you completely? This video is not safe knowledge. Not because it's violent, but because it's liberating. Dangerous to those who built the illusions you live under. If you continue watching, understand this. The descent will cost you comfort, trust, innocence. But what you gain is something far more valuable: vision. The deeper we go, the more the mask slips. The archives they locked away. The testimonies they discredited. The names they erased. You'll see the pattern. You'll hear the voices they tried to silence. And if you listen closely, you'll begin to notice the same signs in your own world. Because what happened in Pleasant Hill wasn't just one community's fall. It was a blueprint, a rehearsal. And pieces of that system still live, disguised, refined, and weaponized against the unaware. You ready to see behind the curtain? Section 2 coming next. Section 2. They called themselves God's perfect order. But beneath the sermons, beneath the robes, was a dynasty of dominion. The Richardson family didn't just lead Pleasant Hill. They possessed it. Every wall, every breath, every silence. This wasn't faith, it was ownership. And they didn't shepherd souls. They engineered obedience. Samuel Richardson was not a preacher. He was a tactician. His sermons weren't meant to inspire. They were psychological warfare, layered with code, rhythm, repetition. He didn't want followers. He wanted blank slates. Every Sunday, he stood at the pulpit like a general surveying his battlefield. His voice low, soothing, weaponized. He wasn't preaching God. He was rewriting the human mind. His wife, Martha, was the true high priestess of control. She could look into your eyes and see what made you break, and then use it. Under her rule, the women of Pleasant Hill didn't just pray. They confessed, wept, submitted. She taught the sisters to smile while bleeding, to obey while doubting, to erase themselves for the illusion of unity. They called it spiritual refinement. She called it sanctification. But it was brainwashing with a veil of virtue. Then came Brother Caleb, the enforcer. His job was simple: know everything. Every conversation, every whisper, every sigh behind a dormitory wall. He kept ledgers not of finances, but of thought crimes. Doubt, nostalgia, curiosity. If you questioned the order, your name went into the book. If you cried in your sleep, he knew by dawn. And if you asked to leave, you never asked again. Pleasant Hill was not a commune. It was a laboratory of control, a perfect ecosystem where power was invisible and total. The Richardsons didn't command through fear. They didn't need to. They made their victims believe that questioning them was questioning God himself. That leaving was betrayal not just of the community, but of salvation. Think about that. What happens when your jailer also controls your concept of eternity? This wasn't just one family's corruption. It was generational manipulation disguised as devotion. It was spiritual tyranny passed from father to son, mother to daughter, refined, reinforced, revered. And here's the most chilling part. It worked. Hundreds gave everything: land, names, families, wills, and in return they were erased from history by the very hands they trusted. This isn't a story of madness. It's a story of method. And if you think that kind of control died with the Shakers, you're already under its spell. Ready for Section 3? Section 3. By 1811, Pleasant Hill had become more than a religious community. It was a closed-circuit, self-sustaining, self-regulating, self-erasing. Outsiders came, left inspired, and never looked deeper, because on the surface, everything gleamed. The clean white buildings, the smiling workers, the perfect order of it all. But it was too perfect. And that's the first sign of something deeply wrong. Control doesn't scream, it whispers. It disguises itself as peace. That's what made Pleasant Hill so powerful. No fences, no chains, just belief so strong it held people hostage. The initiations were the key. Every new convert underwent a cleansing. But this wasn't baptism, it was psychological deconstruction. Sister Rebecca Richardson, Samuel's daughter, oversaw the process with surgical precision. She was a master of identity breakdown. You didn't just join Pleasant Hill, you stopped being who you were. New members were cut off from their old names. Letters from family were screened, rewritten, or intercepted. Possessions were donated, meaning seized. Personal stories were erased, replaced with scripted testimonies. You had to forget to belong. They called it rebirth. What it really was the death of self. And if someone resisted, the Richardsons didn't punish with whips or walls. They punished with isolation, shame, silence. You were moved to the far dormitory, made invisible during meals, forbidden to speak in worship, surrounded by smiles, but utterly alone, until you broke and begged for reintegration. That was their genius. They didn't need force. They made you break yourself. Now imagine this process multiplied across hundreds of souls, year after year, convert after convert. What you get isn't a community. It's a hive mind, quiet, productive, devout, and completely owned. And if a crack formed, if someone remembered who they were, tried to leave, or worse, speak out, they didn't just vanish. They were made to unexist. Records changed, letters forged, graves unmarked. And the others? They never even asked. Because asking was sin. Asking was betrayal. Do you see it now? The perfection was the lie. What Pleasant Hill built was a blueprint. And that blueprint didn't die in 1834. It evolved into institutions, schools, corporations, churches, governments. That's why you feel it. Deep down, when something isn't right but no one else seems to notice. You were never meant to remember what freedom feels like. And now we go deeper. Section 4. The first confirmed disappearance came in winter. January 1813. A young man named Elias McKinnon, only 19, wide-eyed and eager, drawn from Louisville by the promise of spiritual clarity. He worked the fields, sang the hymns, memorized the scriptures. By all accounts, he was one of the most devoted novices the Richardsons had ever received. And then one morning he was gone. No explanation, no farewell. His bed untouched, his tools still leaning against the barn wall, coated in frost. When two brothers asked about him, they were told Elias had received a vision, a divine calling to serve at a sister community in Indiana. But no wagon left that night, no escort, no witnesses. It was the first test. The leadership watched carefully. Who asked questions? Who showed doubt? Who accepted the lie without hesitation? What they learned was simple. The silence would hold. And from that moment they escalated. The next disappearance was quieter. A widowed woman in her 40s, Sister Abigail Martin. She'd arrived with nothing but grief and faith, having buried her 2 children during the last smallpox wave. For 3 years, she baked bread, nursed the sick, and tended the gardens. But when she began asking to visit her sister in Lexington, she too vanished. Again. No witnesses, no goodbyes, just another name removed from the prayer list. This was no accident. The Richardsons were conducting social experiments cloaked in scripture. How far could they push before the community broke? How many disappearances could be masked by piety before the flock began to suspect the shepherd? Turns out, a lot, because by the 4th year, a full dozen members were missing, each explained away by divine mission, sudden illness, or spiritual withdrawal. The term they used was heaven-bound transitions, and the community accepted it. Why? Because Pleasant Hill wasn't just controlling behavior. It was controlling perception. Reality itself was being edited in real time. Members no longer trusted their own doubts. If you saw a contradiction, it was you who had failed in faith. If you felt fear, it meant you had more purging to do. The system turned conscience into a curse. This is psychological warfare at its highest form, not through violence but through inversion. Good became evil. Questions became rebellion. Disappearances became blessings. And you want to know the scariest part? They didn't hide the truth. They rewrote it, so beautifully, so spiritually, that no one wanted to see it. Ready for Section 5? Section 5. By 1815, the community no longer needed guards. They had evolved beyond walls, beyond force. The people policed themselves. Eyes down, voices soft, smiles practiced. Doubt had become dangerous, not because of what leadership would do, but because of what your neighbors might say. They had weaponized faith. Imagine living in a place where silence wasn't just safety. It was salvation. Where every question risked exile, and every whisper could brand you disloyal. That's what Pleasant Hill became. Not a place of worship, a pressure chamber. And the pressure was mounting. See, the disappearances weren't random. They were ritual, calculated. The Richardson family had built an internal logic. Every removal had a spiritual pretext, a vision, a divine rebuke, a calling beyond this life. But they all served one purpose: pruning resistance. And with each name that vanished, the community grew more obedient. Samuel Richardson called it the purifying fire. In his private journal, never meant for outside eyes, he wrote, "A soul in error is like a diseased limb. Mercy lies not in preserving it, but in excision, swift and sacred." That's not leadership. That's eugenics of the spirit. But the brilliance, the terror, was in how they never needed to say it out loud. The community filled in the blanks. Rumors were enough. Whispers. A look from Sister Martha at morning prayer. A cold nod from Brother Caleb during wood gathering. That was all it took to mark someone. And if you were marked, the countdown had begun. Most never resisted. Why would they? Every instinct for survival told them to submit, to believe harder, to smile deeper, to confess more completely. That's how total control works, not by removing your body, but by rewriting your soul. And yet, a few noticed, a few felt it, that something monstrous was moving just behind the hymns, that the same God they worshipped now watched them like prey. But here's the truth. Those few didn't survive, because the Richardsons didn't just eliminate threats. They studied them, perfected their methods, ensured that next time the rebellion wouldn't even form. And you know what that means? Pleasant Hill wasn't just a cult. It was a prototype. Now ask yourself, how many modern institutions echo the same patterns? Spiritual control, silence as virtue, obedience over truth. The names change, the buildings change, but the machine remains, and it's still running. Section 6 coming next. Ready to fall deeper? Section 6. There was a locked room beneath the meeting house. Not marked, not spoken of, not even acknowledged in the architectural plans archived by Kentucky officials decades later. But it was real. A former stonemason named Jonah Reeves, one of the few who worked on Pleasant Hill's foundations, kept crude sketches in a personal Bible. Hidden behind the back cover was a drawing, a narrow stairwell descending beneath the chapel, leading to what he labeled the hollow. He never spoke of it in public. But in 1842, after escaping the community, he left behind a single sentence scrawled in charcoal on the wall of a river mill downstream. The songs are louder down there, but no one sings. What was the hollow? Whispers say it was the place of last trials, where the truly rebellious were brought, not for punishment but for purification. A sacred silence chamber. No light, no sound, no time, just you and your God, or the absence of him. Former members, those who escaped in later years, described hearing about it only in metaphor. The earth must swallow the bitter root. A soul in darkness will either blossom or break. It's unclear how many entered. No record confirms how many returned. But there was one letter smuggled out in the hem of a cloak. It came from a woman known only as Sister L, addressed to her brother in Virginia. She wrote, "I've not seen daylight in 5 cycles. They say I must wait until I stop remembering who I was. They feed me scriptures and take away my name. If this is sanctification, then God has forgotten his face." She was never heard from again. And here's the most chilling part. After Pleasant Hill was officially disbanded in the early 1900s, state officials arrived to catalog the site. The building was empty, the fields overgrown. But beneath the floorboards of the old meeting house, they found iron rings bolted into stone, and the scent of something long dead. They sealed it, covered it, called it an architectural anomaly, because the truth was too dangerous to preserve. Understand this, what happened in Pleasant Hill wasn't just spiritual corruption. It was psychological engineering decades before anyone had a name for it. A system so refined, so quiet, so holy seeming, that even now, people visit the site and feel peace. But what they're feeling is residue, the echo of silence, the perfection of control. And that's the real horror. The machine worked. Want to go deeper? Section 7 is where we confront how it all spread. Say the word. Section 7. Pleasant Hill was never meant to stay isolated. That's the part most people miss. By the late 1820s, the Richardsons weren't just building a community, they were exporting a doctrine. One that masked authoritarian control as divine order. One that used emotional isolation, spiritual guilt, and ritualistic obedience to bend human will into something mechanical. They called it the way of the clean vessel, and it spread like wildfire, first to nearby settlements, Harrodsburg, Danville, Springfield. Quiet, backdoor pilgrimages. Young men and women returning from visits to Pleasant Hill now spoke with new words. Words like containment, refinement, cleansing fire. They wore new expressions. Tranquil, empty, unwavering. But it didn't stop there. By 1831, former Pleasant Hill members had embedded themselves in educational boards, orphan councils, hospital trusts, even military chaplaincies. Always soft-spoken, always helpful, always bringing order. Yet behind the scenes, they were replicating the system. Isolate the vulnerable, break the self, replace identity with doctrine, reward silence, punish memory, and if someone broke down, they called it a spiritual victory. There's evidence that some of the earliest asylums in Kentucky were directly influenced by these methods. Records from the Eastern State Hospital in Lexington mention quiet wards, and soul transitions nearly word for word from Richardson's early sermons. Even Jefferson Seminary, which would later become the University of Louisville, had documented visits from Pleasant Hill missionaries, invited to speak on moral purification in young men. Do you see it? Pleasant Hill was the seed, but its fruit grew everywhere. And here's what makes your stomach turn. Even as mainstream religion began to modernize, these control systems didn't vanish. They evolved. They became secular, psychological, institutional. You walk into them every day now, in schools, in workplaces, in therapy, in churches that claim to be reformed, in influencers that preach mindset while quietly grooming dependency. That voice in your head that tells you to keep quiet, to submit, to doubt your instincts. It's not yours. It's a ghost, a legacy, a whisper from the hollow. We've uncovered the seed and traced the roots. Next, in Section 8, we uncover the modern connections still active today. Still ready? Section 8. What you're about to hear next isn't theory, it's documented. Traced through archives, letters, court testimonies, and even forensic evidence that's been buried under layers of official silence. The Richardsons' descendants didn't just vanish when Pleasant Hill fell. They adapted. They blended into new circles of power, politics, law enforcement, secret societies, where their doctrine of control mutated, invisibly infecting institutions you interact with every day. One startling example. A prominent family in Mercer County with unmistakable genealogical ties to the original Richardsons became involved in early 20th century mental health reform. Publicly, they championed progressive care. Privately, they pioneered methods of isolation and mind control eerily reminiscent of Pleasant Hill's retreat system. Records show these methods used isolation cabins, similar to the Hollow, now called quiet rooms, to break down patients deemed uncooperative. These techniques spread rapidly through psychiatric institutions nationwide. And it didn't stop there. The pattern of forced disappearance, manipulation of identity, and erasure resurfaced in cults, secretive religious orders, and even some government programs designed to re-educate dissenters. It became a covert psychological warfare tactic. Do you realize what that means? The mechanism that swallowed 495 souls in Kentucky over 11 years is still alive. It's been refined, rebranded, and weaponized against entire populations. Every algorithm that traps your attention, every social pressure to conform, every safe space that quiets uncomfortable truths, all echo the same ancient design. And here's the kicker. The control system is adaptive. It learns. It uses your own biology, your own psychology against you. Your thoughts aren't entirely your own. Your fears aren't accidental. Your doubts are carefully engineered. But you can break free. That's why you're here. Because understanding the past is the key to unlocking your mind from the chains of the present. And now, it's time for you to seal your transformation. Type this phrase twice in the comments right now. I see the hidden chains. I break the hidden chains. Doing this isn't just ritual, it's an act of reclaiming your agency. Because once you acknowledge the machinery, it loses its power. And the descent continues. Section 9 awaits. Are you ready to stare further into the abyss? Section 9. Now that you've stepped past the veil, it's time to confront the machinery beneath the surface, the true architecture of control forged in Pleasant Hill and echoed through history. At its core lies a terrifying truth. Power doesn't need visible chains. It thrives on invisible ones: fear, obedience, identity erasure. The Richardsons understood this instinctively. They weaponized community itself, not by threatening with violence, but by dismantling the individual's sense of self and replacing it with collective submission. Today, you see this replicated in social dynamics everywhere. Peer pressure, cancel culture, corporate conformity, even the subtle rituals of online approval. But what makes it so effective is the internal war it ignites, between your innate desire for freedom and the compulsion to belong. The Richardsons exploited this fracture masterfully. Their system didn't just silence dissent. It made dissenters question their sanity, their faith, their very worth. The disappearing members? They became ghosts not only physically but psychologically. The community's collective memory erased them to protect itself. A perfect example of institutional gaslighting. And when individuals began to remember, to resist, they were isolated, discredited, or disappeared altogether. This pattern repeats in modern institutions where whistleblowers and truth-tellers are systematically erased from narratives, replaced by false testimonies, forged evidence, and manipulated facts. What Pleasant Hill teaches us is how easily systems of power can trap not only bodies but minds, creating self-perpetuating cycles of control dressed in righteousness. But here's the most crucial insight. Recognizing this pattern is your first act of rebellion. Awareness isn't just knowledge. It's power. It fractures the illusion. And once the illusion cracks, the system begins to unravel from the inside out. Hold on to that thought, because next, we'll reveal how individual acts of courage dismantled this seemingly impenetrable fortress. Ready for Section 10? Section 10. Even in the darkest systems, there are cracks, fissures born from human will refusing to bend completely. In Pleasant Hill, those cracks started small. A whispered doubt, a secret note, a clandestine meeting in the shadows. One such figure was Sister Mary Caldwell, the quiet woman who cleaned the dormitories each morning. Her discovery of the bitter almond scent in Brother Thomas Whitman's room was no accident. She saw what others refused to acknowledge. She listened when others obeyed silence. Mary wasn't just a witness. She was a threat. She kept a hidden journal, written in code, detailing inconsistencies, strange disappearances, and the cold calculations of the Richardson family. Her words were desperate but clear. "We are prisoners not of iron, but of faith itself." For years, she secretly gathered others, members who still remembered their past lives, who still questioned the stories fed to them. Together, they formed the first true resistance, a fragile web of courage amidst overwhelming darkness. But resistance came at a cost. Mary was disappeared in 1821. Officially, she died from consumption. Unofficially, she was locked in the hollow, left to break alone. Yet her journal survived, smuggled out by a loyal friend, hidden for decades in a hollow tree on the community's edge. Her words later inspired reformers and truth-seekers who unearthed Pleasant Hill's horrors. This tells us something vital. Even the most perfected system of control can be undone by the smallest spark of defiance. Your own resistance, however quiet, however hidden, is part of this lineage. You're not alone. There is power in remembering, power in questioning, power in breaking the silence. That power is why the system fears you, and it's why you must embrace it fully. Section 11 is next, where we explore the legacy of silence and its ripple across generations. Ready to continue? Section 11. The legacy of Pleasant Hill is not confined to the past. It flows like an unseen current beneath the surface of modern America, woven into the very fabric of families, institutions, and ideologies. Generations later, descendants of those vanished still carry the scars. Unspoken traumas, gaps in family trees, missing voices at the dinner table. Entire bloodlines fractured by fear, secrecy, and unacknowledged loss. Communities built on trust slowly eroded by whispered rumors, half-truths, and official silence. And institutions? They inherited the blueprint. The psychological controls perfected in Pleasant Hill, surveillance cloaked in concern, obedience masked as spirituality, isolation disguised as discipline, became templates for corporate culture, educational systems, and even government agencies. Look closely at how today's organizations demand conformity, encourage dependence on centralized authority, suppress independent thought through social pressure, punish deviation with ostracism or career derailment, reward silence and discourage questioning. Sound familiar? It's the same playbook, adapted and sanitized for a modern era, and most men don't realize they're caught in it. But knowledge is the key. You can trace your own chains back to Pleasant Hill's legacy. Feel how deeply the roots have grown beneath your feet. Here's the stark truth. Freedom isn't just about external circumstances. It's a battle for your mind and soul. Every layer of control stripped away reveals the raw power of authentic self-mastery. So, ask yourself, are you still bound by invisible chains? Or are you ready to break them? Because the path ahead is darker, deeper, but infinitely more liberating. Section 12 is coming. Shall we descend further? Section 12. Freedom, real freedom, is not given. It is taken, wrested from the jaws of control through deliberate, conscious rebellion. Pleasant Hill's tale shows us that systems thrive on passivity. They don't fear the loud rebel as much as the silent questioner, the man who doubts in his mind, yet obeys with his mouth. So how do you fight a system built on invisibility? You start by reclaiming your narrative. Recognize the lies whispered in your head, those insidious scripts written by centuries of manipulation designed to keep you small, obedient, and fearful. Pleasant Hill used faith to cage its people. Today's systems use distraction, misinformation, and manufactured consent. The remedy? Awareness fused with action. You must unmask the psychological chains tightening around your thoughts. The subtle guilt when you choose yourself over the collective. The hesitation before speaking your truth. More importantly, you must build mental fortresses, rituals, practices, and communities that nurture independence instead of compliance. Look for the shadows where truth is suppressed, books banned, questions silenced, inconvenient facts dismissed. That's where the battle rages. Pleasant Hill was the blueprint. Modern control systems are the finished product. But you can become the glitch in their design, the spark that ignites awareness in others. Because knowledge spreads like wildfire once it catches. If you feel that fire burning inside you, good. Hold on to it. Section 13 will guide you through tools to fortify your mind against invisible dominion. Ready to arm yourself? Section 13. To survive and thrive within systems designed to control your mind, you must become a master of your own mental terrain. Start by cultivating discernment, the ability to see beneath the surface, to question narratives and motivations without surrendering to cynicism. Pleasant Hill's members lost this skill slowly, piece by piece, until their minds became the family's property. Reclaim it by challenging everything, even what feels most familiar. Then, develop emotional resilience. Control systems prey on fear and shame. They want you fractured and reactive. Meditation, journaling, and deep self-reflection aren't just New Age concepts. They are ancient tools of warriors who refuse to be broken. Next, practice strategic silence, knowing when to speak, when to observe, and when to withdraw. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet refusal to engage on their terms. Build a network of truth seekers. Isolation is a weapon of control. Find your tribe, men who question, who challenge, who awaken. Finally, fortify your daily rituals. Discipline over distraction, routine over chaos. Pleasant Hill's downfall wasn't the strength of their control. It was the emergence of fragmented awareness. Your weapon is clarity. Your shield is commitment. You're not fighting shadows, you're fighting a calculated system. And you can win. Section 14 awaits, with the final truths you're destined to hear. Ready? Section 14. Here's the ultimate truth they never wanted you to hear. Control isn't about domination alone. It's about identity. Pleasant Hill didn't just erase bodies. It erased selves. It demanded the dissolution of individuality, replacing it with a collective mask. And this is the deepest weapon of control. Stealing who you think you are. Modern institutions, they do the same. They craft identities for you through media, education, even religion, building frameworks that subtly dictate what you desire, who you trust, and how you behave. When your identity is externally constructed, true freedom becomes impossible. You live in a cage of your own making, filled with echoes of imposed beliefs and silent obedience. But here's the liberation. You are not your programming. You are not the sum of imposed narratives. You are the creator of yourself. Pleasant Hill's greatest crime wasn't physical disappearance. It was spiritual erasure. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to reclaim your selfhood, to refuse the narratives thrust upon you, to live deliberately, fiercely, and unyieldingly. The final section is next. Are you ready to fully awaken? Section 15. Now, standing at the edge of this revelation, you face a choice. Retreat into the comfort of ignorance or step boldly into the light of dangerous knowledge. Pleasant Hill's secret is a mirror, a reflection of all systems that seek to bind us. You have seen the machinery, felt its cold grip, and heard its silent commands. But you are not powerless. The chains begin to fall the moment you claim your truth. Remember the phrase you typed earlier. I see the hidden chains. I break the hidden chains. This isn't just words. It's a declaration of sovereignty over your mind and spirit. Take that power beyond this moment. Question everything. Resist the subtle controls embedded in culture, authority, and even your own thoughts. Build your own fortress of awareness and freedom. Connect with those who share your courage. Because the true revolution starts inside. Pleasant Hill vanished, but its lessons endure. Now it's your turn to rewrite the story. Walk away knowing you carry forbidden knowledge, the dangerous truth that can never be unseen. And with that knowledge, you become the master of your own destiny. Thank you for descending into this darkness with me. If you're ready to keep uncovering the hidden forces shaping your world, Hit subscribe and join the ranks of those who refuse to be controlled. Remember, power belongs to those who know. And now,